Depictions.
The lights that shine in darkness aren't always visible under the sun. Beware the tales told by the fire's keepers. Those who control the light often hide their own shadows.
Huge fan of the Soulsborne series. Oh my god. That was cool. That was cool.
You're only...
Hey, close the door, close the door, close the door. Alrighty, we're live. And I have to pull up my notes.
Woo.
All right, and welcome everyone to tonight's episode of Just Investigation Check. I am your host, Ninja Spence 21, and who do I have with me right now?
I am Frey.
I am Miro.
All right, and thank you all for having that. You know that we were supposed to have a third. We were supposed to have a third person, but then that their internet decided to be kind of
died.
crappy to them. It just died. But anyway,
the
then.
internet went to dead.
But anyway, then that
Or
we
the internet.
are. Yeah, art the internet, and then if that you haven't heard from all of these terrible puns that we are dishing out, that we are going to be investigating Arthurian legends. You know, then that my topic that we are not going to start with is basically that the relationship between Lancelot and Gwynevere, and then that we are just going to let our two panel people take care of theirs first.
Actually, I'm going to go last. You guys can go first because mine's
Oh.
going to be pretty short. So I figure mine will just kind of be an ending bit to it. It'll be better to do you guys first.
All right, so Miro,
Mine's not
you
as
can
in
kick us
depth.
off. Mine's not super in depth because I was.
Oh.
You have a document. I saw it.
I have a document too.
I do have a document. So before I go into this, it's what my subject is the depictions of King Arthur, not King Arthur himself, but depictions and where the character kind of popped up from and came from. It's similar to a historiography, which is actually more up my line because that's what I have a master's degree in. But not Arthurian, just history, and historiographies were one of my favorite things because I'm not much.
You did the Crusades.
Yeah,
Which technically they're going for the Holy Grail in a lot of them. So
there's that. I'll get to that through part of this, but no. One of the things I've always loved is the history of history, like compiling all the sources, looking at why people wrote it this way, why this document might not be accurate, which means I'm the biggest type of history nerd because I like the history of history, which is the super most boring thing. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about is the different depictions of Arthur through legends. And the big reason that there's so many different versions of Arthur or different visions of Arthur is because there's no one source. even the most ancient of sources or oldest of sources for King Arthur or anything is still not great, because this all started out as spoken word. This was just stories told by different towns throughout Wales and Cornwall and eventually Brittany and other parts of what was then Britain, not England. So there's different flavors, and there's stuff that's not hella accurate, and it leads to some confusing things. Like his age, his physical stature, all this stuff varies based on really who penned it and also when, because after the original ones, you also have, folks writing in the 1100s and the 1000s and then the 1400s and then the 1800s and then the god awful movie with the guy that was in Warcraft and played, oh god, the main character in Vikings. That wasn't his fault. That King Arthur movie was just bad. Jude Law is Morgoth. Just no. But the big thing is there's 3 fairly consistent general topics and depictions of Arthur: the warrior, the quest giver, and the symbol. Now, the oldest version of Arthur that's out there is that he was basically a folk hero, that he was this Celtic warrior fighting the Angles in the Danish invasion. So, fun fact, all the English that like to claim King Arthur will be once again their king, he'd probably come back speaking Welsh, being very confused at why all these Germans are ruling his country. So, really, like, some of the stuff we know about him, like Monmouth wrote the Historia Regalium Britanniae. He mentioned that there were 12 battles Arthur waged with the Saxons. He killed 960 in one battle. It is not noted if Arthur did that single-handedly because he apparently became Thor, or if it's Arthur is claiming all the deaths because his warriors did it. But the very clear thing, even in this first one, is he is a Briton, or a Briton of Cornwall. He's not English. No shining armor, no Camelot, no Round Table, no Merlin, no magic. This dude showed up with his boys and decided to kick some ass. And that's the very first depiction of Arthur, and it's very indicative of the time when the stories came out. Mostly because that's what people sat around and talked about. He was smart, sneaky, but above all else, he was strong. And, I mean, he was a high king, and not the king of... It wasn't like he was really the king of Britain. He was the high king of all the other kings of Britain. So, even in some of the earlier ones, it's not like he ruled all of England directly. He was just elected high king by the rest of them because he's the best. Now, also in a lot of these stories, it's not just pseudo-history and like talking about a folk hero. There's also some supernatural evidence in these first ones, and there's a whole lot of stuff where he's connected to Anu, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right because it's Annwn. Welsh is weird, y'all. And it's the Welsh afterlife. In fact, the first Gwynevere, because there's apparently 3 Gwyneveres in some of these stories. So apparently, back around 400 AD, everybody on Britain just started naming their babies Gwynevere. Like a while back, there was all those Jennies and Nieces. But, oh God, and all the Khaleesi's that I'll have to teach here soon. Whew, parents are probably mad about that. Anyway, so I mean, he's connected to a lot of that, but the funniest thing is that lets you know how long Arthur legends have gone around, is that the first thing we have written about Arthur, which I can't pronounce this name, but the Mabinogion, there we go. There's a hero listed in that book as being like great, fighting dragons, all this, but the end of the sentence is, but he was no Arthur. So we don't know at that point. You don't know anything about Arthur other than this dude who like had a transcontinental adventure still was no Arthur compared to what it was. Now, the general concept with him of this is that he was a warband leader. The historical stuff with this is it's probably based off of a collection of warband leaders who very much everybody started telling stories about them, and they got combined and combined and combined. And then people started adding flavor to it. And the other note I'm going to bring up with this is everything with King Arthur is fan fiction. No matter what anybody else says, you will not be able to convince me. King Arthur is nothing but fan fiction because everybody that is written about him, added to the stories, puts their own flair or their own little OC, Lancelot, or Galahad, or Gawain, which might actually supposed to be pronounced Gavin, or Yvain, which also might be pronounced Evan. Again, Welsh is weird. Everybody adds their own flavor to it. So, I mean, if all of a sudden Thor was riding in, or Odin were riding in King Arthur's war party, that's it. Everybody be like, yeah, cool. He's got like some of the Tuatha Dé Danann from Ireland riding with him. He fought Baelor. I mean, it would not be unheard of if Hercules and him did a tag team with people making up stories back in the day. And Arthur very much in these original depictions fits that epic hero from earlier eras. Strong, snarky, smart, but smart is very weird to define when we get to some of these other ones, because there's some stories where Arthur is, as a warrior, is the greatest warrior, but there's a time he's really just the greatest general, and he knows how to do this and he knows how to do that. But when we get to later depictions, we'll see that the wise great king starts kind of getting twisted. But also with Monmouth, after he kicks out the Saxons, he rules for a few years. Then Rome says, hey, pay us tribute. And he's like, nah, I ain't going to pay you tribute. They're like, well, fine, we're going to go to war. And he's like, well, bet. And then he conquers Rome. Which that is like the most fanfiction-y thing I've ever heard. It's like, yes, our Lord Arthur could even defeat Rome with one arm tied behind his back and a Kamehameha wave. And he was a soul reaper. And he also knew Lightning McQueen. And
he had a death note.
Yeah, he had a death note, but he didn't use it because he was too good. But he also, he punched Saitama and Saitama flew away.
He had a stand.
Yeah, he had the first stand, and it was literally JoJo. He slapped Dio so hard that Dio flew into the 1800s. No, the whole thing is he conquers Rome, and then Mordred, or Morgoth, or Morid. There's a couple different names for this, and there's also some people that say Morgoth / Mordred gets a bad note. If you get up into northern Scotland, they're like, nah, Mordred didn't do all that. That's the British and the English down there being assholes about our boy Mordred. So again, somebody still likes the villain, so it's still fan fiction here. But he dies fighting his nephew, who at this time was not his son, and is mortally wounded and spirited away to Avalon, which I learned Avalon means island of apples. So Arthur's buried under an apple tree somewhere. I wonder if George Washington cut it down and then they became best. I've just fan fictioned this. Now, there's a good chance most of Monmouth's work was to court favor, and this kind of blends into a later fact I have with the symbol, is that Monmouth wanted to gain favor with the Norman court, who were ruling in England, because Monmouth wrote when William the Bastard, now William the Conqueror's grandson, was king. So all of a sudden, a hero who's fighting the Saxons, who are the Angles, the English, who just got defeated by the Normans like this. So now you have a non-Saxon hero who the Normans can be like, oh yes, we pick up after Arthur, and we fight the English and push back the Danes. So you got to take a little bit of you got to take a little bit of anything that's been written down about Arthur with a grain of salt based on where it is. But this first one, this depiction of him with him being a warrior, is the oldest, because what are a bunch of dudes gathered around a fire that are in a war band about to go fight going to talk about? This one dude who kicks some ass. And other stuff that's gross that I'm not going to talk about, because that's not the subject of this. But so this is the oldest depiction of Arthur. He is a Britain post-Roman war chieftain that came from Cornwall and would not know the English language if you slapped him with it. But to be fair, most English speakers wouldn't know it either. And that kind of rolls into the next role of Arthur, which is what most people are actually familiar with. Because most of the stories that people have read about King Arthur, he doesn't go out and do shit. Arthur becomes the king and then rarely adventures. So, I mean, that happens. Like, he puts together this, eventually there's a Merlin, eventually there's a round table, and then we start learning about the boys. All the boys. From the ones that are good and pure, like Galahad and possibly Percival, all the way to the biggest dumbass that ever sat at the round table, Sir Kay. I am not apologizing for that, anybody that actually listens, reads, or does anything with Arthur. Sir
There is
Kay.
no reason to.
There's no reason to.
Sir Kay is the oh honey, and I've yet to read a story, which I haven't read them all, where he is not summarily made a fool because he is the grumpy, whiny brother of the king who got a job because Arthur had to swear it.
Or drunk. Don't forget about drunk.
That's all of them, though, because think about it. We're the idea is like these are knights. They're not knights. Not until like really most of the early stories, none of these guys are really knights. They're not shining armor. They're not jousting. They're not doing that bullshit until you start getting into the French aspect of it, which will fall underneath this section. These are basically dirty, grubby dudes gathered around a fire in a mead hall, getting drunk and telling stories, much like the people that told the stories about them. There's a whole lot of a story within a story kind of stuff, but the real reason Arthur no longer adventures really is based on the writers. Like the Welsh tradition, he becomes a symbol. He's the king. He's a symbol. He unified unified Britain. He pushed back the Danes. He is too valuable, so they can't let him go out and just, oh, there's a dragon. Arthur, oh shit, yeah, I am ready. No, sire, let I go out and do it. Say, Pellinor, god damn it. Okay, yeah, I'm the king. I don't get to do. I rule the kingdom. Can't I enjoy my kingdom? No, you don't get to. That's the Welsh tradition. Also, he has a pretty dope-ass mead hall, so there's fire, there's booze, there's one of 3 Gwyneveres. And in some traditions, he actually had kids. But then it leads into the Romance era. Now, this is a lot more of the French, and this brings in one of the things that I, through my studies of the Middle Ages, do not care for. Courtly love. The act of the troubadour. Now, the thing is, did some of this courtly love stuff exist? Yeah. Did some of the rules, are they good? Yeah. Did they ever effectively get enforced and mean a goddamn thing in a court? Not really. Back then, following courtly rules and following the courtly love doctrine would be like if you went to Books a Million and bought How to Be a Gentleman for $5.99. Like, to give you a whole summary of why the rules of courtly love and courtly activity and stuff like that is not 100% accurate. And all that is, they had to have a rule in there that says, no good lord shall rape. I'm going to let that sink in because they had to make a rule about it so you can actually get an idea of what court life actually was like. There's a lot more Game of Thrones than there is anything that's ever depicted Camelot in a movie in most courtly matters. But that being said, courtly love is a great story element, and it makes a lot of the Arthurian legends to what we know today. Like, one of the things is, in the romances, he is now married. And once a knight is married, either to Gwynevere or the nation, or their other wife, they no longer adventure because now they must be a good husband, a good father, and a good lord. So he gets married to Gwynevere, or when he becomes king, therefore married to the nation, he no longer goes out and adventures. Now, it's the whole thing, like a knight is only a great knight while he strives to obtain a goal. Once he has actually obtained the goal, there's nothing more. There's no reason to adventure. You have done your purpose. Well, I thought this was a side quest. No, son, this was the main quest. You have completed the game. Start a new file. Very sorry. Here's your large tracts of land, your pigs, your family, and a bunch of peasants we don't care about. And live your life, sir, whatever your name is. You're now... Yes. Now, also, it gets into... We don't ever really get Arthur's age. Other than he was like 12 when he pulled out the sword and he unified England between the times he was like 16 and 20, or unified Britain between 16 and 20. But that's not necessarily always the case in depictions, because a lot of times, like, oh man, we don't want to say like a kid did it. You know, he's got to be like, he's got gray in his beard. Yeah, he has gray in his beard. So Arthur is now older. So once he's unified it, he's past his prime. So there's a little bit of that with the romances. And then you get to the French tradition, which this is a whole thing. So, do you all know the history of Brittany in France? Okay. There's a little pointy bit on the northwest coast of France that's just juts out. That's Brittany. Its population is more closely related to the Welsh than to the rest of the French, traditionally. It's called Brittany because when the Danes invaded, when the Germans and the Angles and the Sacs and the Jukes showed up, they fled there and settled there. So one reason that the Arthurian legends made it to the French is through the Britons, or the Bretons. But of course, the French see this as an English hero. But it's oh man, this is a romantic story. Everything about it has everything. It has adventure, it has dragons, it's got like copious amounts of poorly written sex, because it's like everything's described and then it just goes, they banged. We are the French, we can do this better. The English don't know anything. But it's dirty and we got to make it clean. And you know what? That's an English king. And you know who's stupid? The English. So when they start writing about Arthur, he becomes weak or frail. Or whenever he goes out, he makes an absolute, utter fool of himself. In most cases, so he can be rescued by or make the best boy that ever knighted and knighted, Lancelot, look better. Lancelot is a French OC. That is a Gary Sue. And they wrote him that way. And if you go through it, Lancelot is always the best, unless he's told, don't do it, by Gwynevere. And if you see that Lancelot is the best, it is either a French story or it is a retelling of a French story by an Italian writer. Lancelot does not factor that much into a lot of the older tradition. Like there is a chance that Lancelot is based off of an older character that is not named, because there is so much material on him. A lot of people that study this don't think that he was invented whole cloth by the French. But the way they write him is, he is the best knight that ever knighted, because he's our best boy and we love him and nobody can do anything. He punched Arthur so hard that Saitama felt it, kind of situation is what they do. Now, in this era, whatever the reason is, either he's old, he's frail, or he's too valuable to be allowed to go out, the focus of the stories switch from Arthur himself and he becomes a plot device. He facilitates the honor of so many other knights. Like, that even when the French make him look stupid, you got to understand, Arthur is still such an honorable king that all these other knights want to join him, and simply by being a part of Arthur's court, they become more honorable. And that's one of the things with Lancelot. If Arthur wasn't so great, the greatest knight never would have came to Camelot. But again, these romance stories, these ones that come from the Middle Age or late Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and even all the way up till some of the early 1800s, Arthur becomes a quest giver. He literally has a little exclamation point above his head. You go to him and he tells you that he needs you to catch 15 wild boars and the hunting beast. And that's what it is. Now, the biggest and most vague of the three that I picked is Arthur the Symbol, because everybody in here and anybody that's listening, Arthur is a symbol. Always has been. I mean, the first one I'm going to start off with, I'm not going to talk about him being a Jesus allegory because no, I don't want to talk about Aslan, Arthur, Jesus Christ here. We all get it. He died. He will come back. He's the once and future king. We get the allegory. Done with that whole chain of thought because there are too many people that have written about this and I'm not going to look into that much goddamn info. Not sorry. But Arthur was originally a symbol of Britain resistance against the Saxons, similar to Robin Hood or maybe Spartacus in some ways. And so, of course, every Britain town, every area had an Arthur story because the Saxons took over a solid chunk. I mean, there's a reason that England is called England and not still called Britain. I mean, the people there, they're not really British. It's just in America, we use British, English, and all that synonymously, and it's not 100% correct. But eventually, yeah, the Saxons win because we're speaking English, the language that comes from the Angles. But he was very much their Robin Hood, their Spartans. He was their folk hero that stood up to them. And in the times they were beating him, he was a symbol of hope. And when times that they were being defeated and pushed back, he was a symbol of comfort and console because we've done it before and maybe Arthur will come back to save us. And then the Normans latched on to him after the Battle of Hastings, and anybody that wanted to get favor in court, they started telling more stories about this brave Briton king who fought against the Saxons, going, you know what, he's a lot like William the Conqueror. He's a lot like William the First. William the First is almost an Arthur. Now, the one thing I will mention with Christianity, though, is some of the earlier stories are weird. Because it's like Beowulf. They added Christian notes on top of a pre-Christian society or story, like the Grail. The original Grail story is that thing's either a big serving dish or a pot. It's a cauldron, which is very much a Welsh thing. Also, fun fact, there is a Scandinavian version and whole history and lineage of Arthur stories. And the first guy to write about it, and Arthur found something that the French call a grail. We're not sure what it is, but Arthur found it. It was awesome. And then they went on their next adventure. That is my favorite Arthur finds the grail story is. We don't know what his grail is, but the French said he was looking for it, so he found it and it was awesome. Then he went and fought a dragon. I like this story. Now, let's see, I already mentioned the plot point. I mean, and I got to mention this one. The whole thing, like Galahad or Lancelot shining so much from the French traditions against Arthur, it's kind of like saying Goku and Superman would fight. It's like stupid nerd rivalry. But in truth, we know this. Goku and Superman ain't gonna fight. Lancelot and Arthur kind of fight. Depending on the story, sometimes it's cool, sometimes it's not. But now, eventually, through the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance, the English are going to take Arthur and turn him into the nation's hero. There's a little bit of irony that the descendants of the Saxons are going to take a Welsh or Cornish hero and turn him into their nation's hero. It's a little bit of reappropriation. But this also ties into the War of the Roses. When the Tudor family took over with Henry VII, they had to find a way to legitimize their descendants. So, because they were neither York nor Lancaster, they married in, and they came in, and so when Henry VII takes over, his rule is tenuous. But he said, well, we're technically Welsh, so I think we're descendants of Arthur. So he named his first son Arthur and his second son Henry VIII. And Henry, when his brother died, before he could become king, Henry now is going to become the king. And he had a round table built to try to say, yes, while you're at Hampton Court Palace, we eat at the round table of Arthur himself. All I can think of is Grunkle Stan with this. Hey there, kids! Welcome to Hampton Court Palace. This table over here, 100% eaten on by King Arthur himself. He ate all his giblets and everything on this. Look at it. That looks like, no, it's 100% real. It's not plywood from down the street. He did it to gain favor for a shaky dynasty. It never really worked because, I mean, the Tudors are going to die out with his daughter. Now, as it continues, Arthur eventually still takes on more of this gallant, shining, high medieval plate-mailed armored knight, because in the 1800s, that's what they wanted to see. They wanted the good king. They wanted the shiny. They wanted the good, great, wise ruler. And that depiction became the most popular for, well, to today. And so when all of a sudden you read a story where Arthur goes to relieve himself in the bushes, but tells his guards, hey, look, I need privacy. I need to take a dump in private. They're like, yay, king, but we must protect you. No, I'm going to be fine. And like Arthur, while taking a dump, gets captured. Like it happens like 4 times. So that really clashes with the more modern depiction of Arthur as this great wise king. I mean, think about it. What was it, Last Night with Richard Gere and let's see, Sean Connery. Sean Connery played Arthur, and you have this old dude married to a girl in her 20s when Gwynevere was actually supposed to be older than Lancelot, but I mean, Richard Gere was in his 30s. But that's another thing that's an issue with depiction. You want Arthur to be great, wise, and brave, so you depict him as a man in his 40s or 50s. You know, he's not maybe physically as strong as he could be, but he's wise. But the woman has to still be in her 20s so she can still be hot and pretty. It's bullshit. But that's the standards we deal with. Now, this eventually, by the time you get to the World Wars, Arthur is full on an English hero. He spoke English. He was in Camelot is near London, not out in Cornwall or near Tintagel. And he becomes the nation's sign of hope in darkness, because maybe Excalibur can be found again in a lake. Maybe Calibron can be found. Maybe the Sheath, or maybe Arthur himself will emerge from the mists of Avalon and say, I can't speak Welsh. I'm not even going to try, but they'd all be confused. But maybe he'll come out, my countrymen, rally to me. I am your once and future king. Who are these Germans on the throne? Always remember that the Windsor family's real last name is like Saxe van Cohen. They're German cousins of the last royal line that, no. The ones that we fought in the American Revolution were still descended of Germans. So it's been since at least Charles II and James II, roughly that time period. Any case, they were Scottish, though, because that was the Stuart line. Now, the biggest thing about Arthur is that how he is depicted 100% depends on who's writing him. You go back to the ancient writings and spoken stories, he is the biggest badass that walked on a battlefield. You get to the Middle Ages, he's a wise king that picks good knights to support him and help him rule his kingdom. You get to movies, and he is this nearly infallible individual, Solomon-esque. You get to some books, and he's an asshole, and he's brash, and he's stupid, because they'd rather focus on the love story, because they feel that even though it might be wrong, the love story is more interesting. I mean, it depends. It's all fan fiction. Somebody's mad, so they kill him off, and you want to focus more on the other characters. Like Mists of Avalon, we're going to focus on almost all the women in his life. Totally cool. You're giving more lore to this story. Because the thing about Arthur is the canon is there is no canon. But the thing is, Arthur is always there to pretty much represent the best qualities that are out there. If you're telling a true King Arthur story, you want him to represent the best qualities of the era he's being written in. I mean, it results in a weird, conflicting almost drug-induced world that he rules and runs. Many modern translations and other works associated with him seem like people inserted their own piece without removing conflicting information. And like I said earlier, it's like the Christianization of Beowulf. There's bits and pieces that don't 100% make sense because sometimes someone copied and pasted in. And that's Arthur. He's a folk hero that is a canvas for anybody to add what they want to him. And nobody needs to be arguing about what is truly Arthurian and what's not because, like I said, it's all fan fiction. Some of it good, some of it bad.
All right. Well spoken. I mean, that's good. So now that my focus on that this part was basically the relationship between Lancelot and Gwynevere, that and basically mine isn't as more historical. It is more mainly focused on why was that affair introduced, and in that basically a little bit about courtship. But in short, Lancelot and Gwynevere are King Arthur's greatest knight and queen to Arthur respectively. Their importance of them basically establishing courtship and chivalry tropes. While that their love was an act of infidelity and betrayal that led to the destruction of the round table, because hey, that you don't do that. That you know that is homie's wife. Why are you doing that? Anyway, then that you know that legacy has basically helped shape the night storytelling that we have used to tropes up in so many things of like media, as in our D&D games, TVs, TV movies, other book, which is not basically specific to one person, but it is plot points into helping us creators basically decide what can we do up in these situations. But let's just try to figure out who these two are deeper. Lancelot de Lac, or else that is French for Lancelot of the Lake. It was so many versions of him that you don't even know just much as like Miro said, was it just like somebody's fan fiction that like Lancelot, blue, blue eyes, blonde hair, black eyes, etc. We don't know what exactly is the original version in a sense, but some have basically depicted him as King Arthur's close companion and one of the greatest knights of the Round Table, and that the French inspire Arthurian chivalristic romance tradition. Lancelot is the orphan son of King Ban of the Kingdom of Benwick that was raised by the fairy realm of Lady of the Lake. So basically, Lancelot is a fae. You can't argue that. Anyway, hero that he that you know that hero that he is the hero of so many tales of his of just like of just like his victorious feat and various challenges that makes him the ideal knight. But he just mainly focused up in swordplay and jousting. I mean that's fair. However, that the closer to Queen Guinevere he got as her personal champion, the more that their love blossomed, and basically that's when problems had happened with the whole affair that I don't know caused a civil war that was like instigated by Mordred that had basically usurped Arthur's kingdom and had led to a lot of people dying. But his character was explored further with the Holy Grail, which that which that he actually fails on purpose, which I will get to in just later up in my document. But his son, Sir Galahad, is basically a more improved, perfect knight version, aka Lancelot 2.0. and just basically achieving the quest that his father had failed due to his adultery and sinful nature. So basically, you just think of like Goku's Nimbus Cloud. You have to be pure-hearted to ride it. Lancelot, he would have fell his ass off of the Nimbus Cloud. Anyway, so now we got Queen Gwynevere. Gwynevere has been portrayed in just many ways during her various stories, from basically an opportunistic villain that basically betrays Arthur and end up around to the upstanding nobility with flaws that causes her inevitable downfall. The villainous actions of her character can be seen in Godfrey's of just monomouths, Historia Regum Britanniae. Sorry,
it's a mouthful.
yeah, it is a mouthful. Galahad, go ahead. That's beautiful. Which is basically a quasi-historical account of which that she was seduced by Mordred during his rebellion against Arthur. Through this, though this account was debatable, but everybody's favorite cultural retelling of her story follows Sir Thomas Malory's Les Mortes d'Arthur, which just places with the Lancelot affair, sorry about that, which just places more emphasis on that the Lancelot affair, and then explore the theme of just loathing her half sister Morgan, and then that's basically getting it all up for that the juicy drama and such. Uh, oh yeah, here it is. She and Lancelot's story have formed most of the backbone for Mallory's master. Though that it is not the focus of this research, her just abduction stories showcases those early versions of her being a more classic knight, save the damsel in distress. That the subtext of these stories are to show the connections to the fertility and sovereignty of Britain at the time. It just it just wasn't Sir Lancelot that came to her aid, and that the earlier tales as well. It was basically before Malory, a Welsh cleric, and Arthur of the Life of Gildas recounts her being kidnapped and assaulted by Melwas, the king of the Summer County. That the tale's ending is more of a peaceful revolution and the motif of the Irish Iathid, or a mysterious stranger kidnaps a married woman and takes them to their home. The husband of the married woman rescues her against all insurmountable odds. So it is just basically that the hero saved the princess for you gamers out there, pretty much. I mean, it's just pretty much just, that this is basically the backbone for, that this is the building blocks for all of the oldest trope in the book. That the girl gets that, I know that the princess is captured, the hero has to go save her. So in a sense, Mario will fall up into this genre, because that technically Princess Peach did get kidnapped, and Mario has to go through 8 to 12 levels at this point to basically try to save her from this onslaught of these odds that are just killing her. But anyway, here it is. That her face now that her first time being saved by Lancelot is in Cretans de Troyes. It's Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, which is basically Lancelot's first depiction. Which in fact that we actually have the guy who had basically not only like invented the affair of basically Lancelot and Guinevere, but he had also basically made up this character of Lancelot himself. and also with just a little bit of help by basically Marie de Champagne that she just basically was just like, now Troyus, I just need you to just make sure that this has a little bit more juice in it. Yeah, yeah, that like one of basically that the Knights of the Round is gonna have the affair with the Queen. That's gonna be a very good story. And that's how we got this situation for this triangle or quadrangle love situation story, because that up in like some depictions it is King Arthur, Gwynevere, Lancelot, and Mordred, that they are just all up in this whole just basically love just quadratic formula. And how in the world that works, you have to keep up with the lore and stuff. So now let's just go ahead and then talk about that let's just talk about that the major importance about this affair and knightly courtship. By one definition, courtship is behavior designed to persuade someone to marry or develop a romantic relationship with one. Essentially, two friends grow into a budding relationship, becoming soulmates, aka friends with benefits. Plus, in Lancelot's and Guinevere's cases, that this can be seen as a betrayal of trust, and out of basically sanctifying the religion aspect of it during just the time. Essentially, because of his sin of loving Arthur's wife, Lancelot cannot achieve his goal of just obtaining the Holy Grail due to the loss of his purity. I mean that just as I had made that the Goku and then the Nimbus Cloud comparison, whenever that the old school Dragon Ball, Goku was so pure hearted, so he could not ride the Nimbus Cloud. Although that kind of begs the question: after Gohan was born, he wouldn't have been a pure soul, so he still is able to ride it. Anyway, that's cartoon logic. But
Goku
anyway,
was an innocent dumbass. I still don't think he understood quite what happened between him and Chi Chi that night.
That is why Team 4 Star has the best version of Goku. If Gohan dies, Chi Chi won't give me mouth present. He doesn't know exactly what it is, but I'm sorry, Lancelot's a little bit of a himbo in most stories, but goddamn is he not gorgeous and wonderful with what he does.
oh yeah, I mean absolutely. And where was I? Oh yeah. So basically, uh, much the same way happens up in reality. Guinevere's infidelity mirrors the errors of effect of the political strife at the time, and also a little bit of today. Not going to get into it, but that the most basically well-known one that everybody likes to make memes out of is the whole Bill Clinton scandal, and we are just going to leave it at that, because we are just going to leave it at that. But anyway, as scandalous and controversial it may be, that the art of courtly love was a product of the 12th century. That the article that I had read goes into depth about the love affair between the two more up in her article, Lancelot and Guinevere, that they love affair through the ages. However, in short, Ellis breaks down the three stories that play into different themes on their affairs and what effects it has on our lovely pair. That the final story I mentioned is Lord Alfred Tennyson's Guinevere, which is more of which was created up in the Victorian era of Britain, and then that the three, and then that these three stories can be broken down as simple as the following: the night that the night of the cart is just basically similar to that the Irish motif that I had just mentioned earlier, and pretty much that's the beginning of basically that the lan- that you know that the that the Lancelot X Guinevere ship. Then we have the more of the author. Basically, it is the expansion on Troy's work, and basically it just added more drama and tension. Lord Tennyson's Guinevere, condemning the affair into damnation and treating it as just a traitorous as just traitorous actions to her country, people, and more importantly, Arthur, because that she actually up in this version, Gwynevere is just already is at the nunnery up and just hiding anonymously because of her and Lancelot has just already been found out, and then it's just basically that Mordred is just like, I got you now. I am basically gonna ruin all y'all pathetic lives and stuff. Okay, so in this genre, knights are still classified as servants to the king and queen. And the entire idea of the affair can be thanked to our lovely Marie de Champagne that had basically inspired Troy to basically add the affair to a story to give it some more umph and also to give it some more character to Guinevere. We can go on and on about the reasons behind Lancelot's and Guinevere's affair, but the importance here is for that it has made a prominent trope of kingdoms could fall victim to the act of infidelity. An argument could be argued that Arthur was a boring husband or too busy conquering other lands for just for Guinevere to be a more fulfilling husband. And basically, I just wanted to just basically talk about that Lancelot and Guinevere in modern settings. Most most modern adaptations do not focus on the villainous nature of the affair and ham up the drama to add some additional conflict, only to mostly of other love just interests of Guinevere, Arthur, and Mordred. So basically, then they are basically expanding on this whole like love just quadrangle that they got going on, and basically that they just make it up, and then that they make it a little bit more like sappy, romantic and stuff. But to me, that I would say that this basically makes the audience more sympathetic towards Guinevere and basically fleshes out her character. My personal favorite example currently is the Excalibur Rising series. And for those that are basically will be watching this on YouTube up in the future, you can just skip ahead after my tangent because I will be going into spoilers, and spoilers are starting now. That the reader learns early on that the actual Guinevere has been killed and is replaced by a changeling that has taken a more of an active role as a fighter, because up in this book that they got this kind of like medium magic system. Like if you was to cast, let's just say that the spell blindness on somebody, you yourself will become blind for like 3 days and such. So yeah, it was very much like a lot of good fey magic and stuff. And we, the reader, learn up in that the first book, the Guinevere deception, that the Patchwork Knight is actually Lancelot, but Lancelot in this series is actually a woman in this series of books. And basically to avoid more spoilers, that the dynamic between the both of them is more of duty that is basically conflicting with that the love and betrayal with just their interpersonal relationships rather than affecting Camelot as a whole. And that the book series is by Kirsten. All right, I am done.
Before we get to Emily's, which you mentioned there, Spence, with the changeling,
Yeah,
I posted in the chat. The false Guinevere is a whole arc in one of the Arthurian legends to where Guinevere has to prove to Arthur that the Guinevere he has been with for the last year is not actually Guinevere, but someone that has used magic to appear as her to get close to him.
interesting.
Also, depending on the Welsh myth, Gwynevere is the daughter of a Welsh king who made a cape out of the beards of the men he defeated in battle.
Itchy.
Yeah, He was also supposedly a giant, but I don't like every other person in ancient Britain apparently was a giant, so I'm guessing he was like 6 foot. I don't know, just fun little tidbit to add on to there.
Oh yeah.
Neat. So I guess I'm up. I don't have a huge thing to talk about. My subject is the Lady of the Lake, but not a little bit of her as a whole, not very much, but just one aspect that I have come across before, which I'm sure if anyone's been on Tumblr in the last like 10 years, they've probably seen this, but I'm going to bring it up. So, just quick overview as if anyone doesn't already know. Lady of the Lake is in a whole lot of Arthurian legend, used in a whole lot of different ways. The names she's best known for, besides Lady of the Lake, are Nimue or Vivian, or a similar variation depending on the text and the language. She has names in a lot of languages, but I'm not going to try and pronounce anything like Welsh because I'm an American reprobate and I will butcher it. So she's usually a fairy or a fairy-like figure in many of the legends, and always plays some kind of pivotal role anytime she's included. And originally, there's one Arthurian scholar who actually proposed that the name she's known by, Vivian, from French Arthurian romances, was actually incorrectly derived from a word that I'm not going to try and pronounce that means a wanderer of pallid countenance. That was actually what was originally applied to the original figure that became Merlin. So, but it was an obscure word and it was misrepresented as fair wanton maiden. So that eventually got applied to who became this version of Merlin's captor. Because one of the things Lady Lake does is trap Merlin in a tree or a cave and he dies. But there's a whole lot of different connections to Welsh lake fairies, including a Lady of the Lake that's not even related to King Arthur. There's water goddesses, um, possible prototypes for other lovers and wives and sisters of Merlin. She's had connections made to Diana, the goddess of the hunt, the sea nymph Thetis, because she was the mother of the great hero Achilles, who also provided him with his magical weapons. So she's, the one that gave Arthur Excalibur. Because a lot of people make the mistake that the sword in the stone was Excalibur, and it was not. It was just a different sword, and it broke. He needed a better one, and he got it from the Lady in the Lake. She's also the one who most of the time was said to have raised Lancelot after his father's death. But one aspect of her that I what? Sorry, my husband's trying to show me something. What? Just a sec. Crap! I lost my place. Shit. Sorry. All right. Anyway, the the thing that I just wanted to talk about is something I've seen before. It was originally brought up in All Things, by a historian or anything, but in a Tumblr post by an author named Jennifer Povey, I believe. And that is a depiction of the Lady of the Lake that I wish would become more popular, and I really want to see. So, from the Iron Age through the medieval period, most iron in Northern Europe came from bog iron because it didn't require mining, it was renewable, and it also comes from water, which is a theme that you would see with the Lady in the Lake. Now, fairies don't generally like iron in myth. So her, you know, what makes more sense with that point is her being a priestess or a worshiper of the Celtic deity Bridget, who is the goddess of smithing and ironworking, which therefore, bam, completely logical roadway for the Lady of the Lake being a yoked blacksmith. Which I would love to see. I think that would be an amazing, different portrayal of her. But and another sort of connection to that someone else made is that uh Excalibur possibly having been made of Damascus steel. And the reason that it makes sense is it's an extremely high quality metal. Like Vikings supposedly, if they got a hold of it, they gave it to their best fighters because it was the best weapon they could get. But the way that the sword is made to make it so strong, it gives it a pattern that is reminiscent of flowing water. And some consider them magical. So a water-like appearance, a connection to her, obviously, and a woman handing swords out of the middle of a lake. Awesome water sword from a badass blacksmith fairy seems worthy of a king to me. So that was why I wanted to go last. My point was pretty short. I just thought it was cool. I just think it would be a real interesting take on her if she were to be brought into a more modern retelling again.
I mean that yeah, I mean that that I don't want to get into like spoilers or anything about the Lady of the Lake up in like the Excalibur Rising series, but she's a pissed off lady in that book. That's all I gotta say. But yeah, that her as a blacksmith, I can definitely see that being used because a lot of people always like to like associate smithing with fire all the time. That'd be an interesting take.
And she's always shown as, and a lot of times she's this very feminine, demure figure. Nah, she can fuck shit up already. I mean, she fucked up Merlin. So I think showing that she could also swing a hammer would be pretty badass.
And a lot of the older myths, the Lady of the Lake would come in and call some of Arthur's knights out on their shit. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you go and look at some of the old myths, they needed to be called out on their shit.
Oh yeah.
Especially Sir Kay.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that Sir Kay for a long time was actually a Knight of the Round Table because my only knowledge of Kay was from the frickin' Sword in the Stone from Disney, and he was just a dumbass in that too, so it still fits either way.
Oh no, it gets a little bit better. He's not just a Knight of the Round Table, he is Arthur's seneschal.
I'm gonna send my dumbass stepbrother to go talk to people. That's a great idea, Arthur. Let's see how that works.
His adoptive father, Kay's actual father, when it was revealed Arthur what his real heritage was, realized his son was an O'Honey and went, Arthur, I will support you in all you do, but you must take care of Kay and make sure he's your son.
Please give him a job. He can't do anything else.
Outside, Kay is sitting there sniffing his finger after scratching his butt. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sorry, Sir Kay.
But yeah, that up in short, that Arthurian legend has always been a great thing of pop culture to always go by and use because it seemed like that these stories never get old, and then it is basically
it's limitless.
It is like limitless, and then it can be argued as the first ever Justice League quotation mark question mark.
I will tell you that the first isekai, the first official isekai, is connected to King Arthur. And that is a Yankee in King Arthur's court by...
Oh, shit! Oh shit,
I
you're
remember
right.
that movie. Yes, that movie.
No,
I read
no,
that
not
book.
not.
No, it's a book.
It's not a movie. It's by the one and only Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain.
Yeah,
Oh shit.
that there was a book and a movie.
Not,
Yeah,
Oh
the
wait,
book's old as fuck. I
I
remember reading it.
also
yeah.
Oh my god, it is the original isekai.
I do remember reading that vaguely, though. I think we had to read it in college because
It is good.
I know that we had to read the original Morte Arthur, and oh boy, we had
That I
spent
read
a
in college.
whole we had spent we now that we had spent one whole quarter reading about that, and then I was like, wow.
I wish we'd gotten a quarter. We definitely did not get that much on it.
you literature nerds can totally do that. I'm gonna do what I did and read bits and pieces from those books and listen to a Great Courses Plus and use the internet because I did download one of the big Arthurian legend books, and that is 40 hours. So guess what I'm gonna be listening to soon.
Yeah, then if that you will also check out the Gwynevere Deception and then at the Excalibur Rising books. I think that retelling it just showcases that like if that they would have kept with that the false Gwen story, it just gets so interesting because I can't really go much into it because it just plays on a lot of more character dynamic and plus then that that it has one of the most badass scenes in the third book that about with Merlin that will have you on the edge of your seat listening to it. Oh yes, and then that Sir Kay and then Sir Hector are basically drunk porn dogs that are dumbass.
This has not changed much. Sir Bors usually can be thrown into that, but Bors is a French edition. Like, of the knights, if you're going by like the original ones, Gawain, Yvain, Kay, are really like the oldest knights that keep popping up, plus a couple of more minor ones. There's one that starts with a B. It's not Bedivere, because Bedivere is a French edition, and he's supposed to be the wisest. But there's another B. There's
Uh,
another B name, and before Lancelot was added, what he did started the downfall of Arthur's kingdom. But we will say this: we still dodged the most sketchy thing about any and all Arthurian legends.
what would that be? Morgan Le Fay and then
No,
Mordred?
no, Merlin.
Oh,
Merlin,
I mean,
Merlin
yeah.
is Merlin is the sketchiest mother because like, hey, Arthur, you know how's this kid Mordred? Yeah. Okay, that's actually your son, not just your nephew. You hooked up with your sister. Super sorry, I forgot to tell you about that because I was off like macking on a junior lady of the lake. What? It's like, yeah, that's gonna be a thing. She's pissed at me. I taught her magic, but Merlin, how old is she? Age is just a number. Okay, R. Merlin. Um, no, but okay, yeah, like that's your kid, and he's gonna try to kill you. So we need to kill him. Well, Merlin, what do we do? We're going to get everybody to send their kids to a summer camp for us, and then we're gonna crash the boat. What?
You
Merlin?
just made
What?
Merlin sound like Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty.
He is.
Oh my god!
There, Merlin's original solution for Mordred is tell every noble we have to send the kids to summer camp and we're going to crash the boat.
No worries about all the other nobles' kids.
Okay, it was mostly nobles that had been like not super in support of Arthur, and this was supposed to like it was like if everything goes wrong, we're just punishing the people that don't like us, but like grab a couple folks that are loyal to us too, and it's just a tragedy, and like we'll be super supportive of them. Be like, oh, super sorry, but Mordred still survives, but like all the other kids die because the boat crashes into the Orkneys. Merlin is sus. Merlin is sus, y'all. He deserved to be locked up in a tree.
Or else just like sealed up in a cave.
Or knifed.
Hashtag Lady of the Lake wins.
Hashtag.
Yes, Lady of the
Hashtag. God damn it, Merlin.
Oh boy, but I do believe I think then that is it. That we can had a good conversation about this. I mean that the only thing that I can only honestly say is that like if you ever want to pull some inspiration from Arthurian legend to basically use up in your D&D, use it more so for your NPC. Do not subject your players to this. They will hate you. They
I,
will hate
I,
That's a lore drop nobody wants.
no, here's the
you.
deal.
Right.
Some of the things in the myths work really good for traps, like uh Yvain and the Knight with the Lion. You gotta pour water on a stone and it summons a storm, but to stop the storm, the lord of the castle has to come out. But then you fight him, and if you defeat him, you get to go in the castle and do all the other crap. Like this very complicated Rube Goldberg device on how to open up a castle door is awesome. Your party will hate you though.
Dang it, LeBlanc, you came in too late.
Yeah. Or else that that you can even like from like the Curse and White series that they use like hair knots for magic, which is very useful. And then also then that you can also take the whole like iron shavings around doors to basically make any type of fey heritage creature or PC feel weak against it. You know that they have like disadvantage if then that they are using like an iron sword. Iron plate mail hurts them and such stuff like that.
That is why being a transmutation wizard, if they ever made a spell that was long distance transmutation, just do that. Just change their armor. It is their problem
Right.
now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean then that you can just take any of it because isn't like King Arthur stuff is public domain?
Large chunks of it are. However, here's the thing: is I think that there has been more material about King Arthur produced since 1980, since the
Mm,
first stories were written down. So like
gotcha.
every year we're dealing with, maybe 40 new Arthurian things coming out. So if you're looking back at the old ones, yeah, totally domain free. The names of the characters, the concepts, domain free. Make up your crap that you want.
Right.
Lancelot is no longer the greatest knight, but the greatest TikTok influencer.
No.
Good.
And he
No. Good. No. That oh no. I mean, but hey, that you could also go that the route of basically toning it down all the way to actually like that, like modern like night fighting. I was watching a video about this, about to where then it got normal Joe Schmo and people are dressing up in armor and stuff, and then that they are actually doing medieval combat, like jousting, sword play, and all of that.
find the video where one dude ran into battle with a frying pan. I'm not joking. That in one of those big anachronistic battles, all these other dudes are wearing have war hammers and crap. One dude runs in with a cast iron skillet and wrecks house.
Oh yeah, I mean that like that. I am talking about that. This is like a national, international competition of like night battles and stuff. I'm like, put this in the Olympic. But yeah,
Because
then that go on.
so I was going to say it's in any of those videos or anything like that. If you watch how knights actually fight in armor, you realize how off anything in movies and TV are. Simply because
Mm-hmm.
90% of the time, what you're trying to do is score a ringing blow on the helmet and knock them down so they yield. Because
Mm.
I don't, I haven't had it happen, but I've heard people talk about it that do stuff like that on YouTube. If you ever get your bell rung in a helmet, it sucks. It's not just, it's loud, it echoes. Not only do you get the concussive force on your head, but you also get like the tinnitus after effect.
Nice. I mean, then that hopefully then that we had that we was able to basically I think everybody have passed this investigation check well enough. So then that that thank you all so much for joining, and then I will basically turn it over to Miro for our announcement.
I'm going to let Frey do it because I was also uploading some stuff to our YouTube during this video. And apparently there are new memes of putting different bad guy characters on the Emperor of Mankind from Warhammer. And I am staring at Homelander, and it is the most terrifying thing ever. So...
In other words, you had an ADHD shiny.
Yeah. Also, it's advertising the Grey Poupon ice cream to me again.
No, we're not spending $5 on that shit.
Ew. No, we don't want that.
No, we don't. They made worse ones too, but we're not going to talk about that.
They
Anyway,
have
tomorrow we'll
they
be
have
playing.
pizza.
No, I had to try pizza cotton candy at work. We ain't buying pizza ice cream. Fuck that shit. Fuck all that shit. Anyway, we will be here tomorrow night when we play Lost Seas, not Holy Winds, brain. We are not back to Holy Winds yet. We will be playing Lost Seas, where we're probably about to get our asses kicked. We will be back on Thursday with Tears of Kairos with the Tears of Kairos group. It is not me. And then, do you guys have a one next Sunday?
No, we next weekend will be Toolkit, which I will probably be painting again unless I go buy foam. If I buy foam, I will be crafting terrain.
Oh, you're not going to show everybody your laser?
That will actually damage the webcam.
Just put the glasses over it.
Then it will damage my eyes.
All right. Anyway, we are Team Bonus Action. We are here on Twitch under that name. We are under YouTube on that name. You can go back and see any of our previous games, our podcast, everything over there. You can find us on Facebook at Team Bonus Action. We are at bonus_team. On Twitter, I have not made a Team Bonus Action TikTok yet, but I have one where I post stupid shit. Sometimes I update about it, sometimes I forget. FRE.KUN. And I think that is all I got. So, since Knox is not here, don't let me
go.
That was terrible.
That was the lag.